Also, don't forget we have a CEM course coming up in April. That's already up on the website. You guys probably already received an email about it. It's a discounted rate. This is for national, and the teacher is a lot better than the national one. So please consider it. Okay.
Give him the $5
So I'd like to present for you guys a new incentive program we have for National Grid to help customers reduce their peak energy use, their electricity use in the summer. Why would we be interested in doing that? It's an odd thing about the grid that the top 10% of hours of the year actually account for more than 40% of the cost of running the grid. So if we can decrease electric use in just a handful of hours, we can have a disproportionate effect on people's bills, on the infrastructure we have to build, on the carbon footprint of building all that infrastructure. So it's a big win-win. I'd just like to cover why are we interested in decreasing our infrastructure spend is mostly to help our customers, but also the carbon footprints. Also, demand response helps us to integrate intermittent renewable resources. So why are we interested in all that? This is nothing you guys haven't heard before, but I think it bears repeating. Since I was born, which wasn't that long ago, we have put this is in million tons of carbon every year into the atmosphere. And unfortunately, it's just going up globally. This has caused, in the short time that I've been around, we've actually changed the composition of the entire atmosphere of the Earth. When I was born, if you went outside with a CO2 meter, you would have read 340 parts per million. Now, in some parts, it's near 400 parts per million. 20% increase in about 35 years. This has had a profound effect on temperatures.
You look much younger.
I got socks
On temperatures, in fact, 2014 was the highest at that time, the hottest year on record since we started keeping records, and then 2015 was the hardest year on record, and now we know that 2016 is a new hottest year on record. So a pretty scary trend. So this is what's really driving us to decrease how much energy has to go into running the grid and get those intermittent renewables connected. To help customers implement demand response, we went through an extensive vetting process to pick the very best vendors in the industry. Here they are. If you guys grab the flyer, their contact information is right there on the flyer. If you didn't grab a flyer, make sure you get one on the way out. Gatto from CPower will also be speaking today. And it's not just to save the world. We're giving customers a very generous incentive of $35 per kilowatt for every single year. This isn't a one-off incentive. So based on our knowledge, we think that's going to provide some very compelling paybacks for customers, and we hope to have a very successful program. Now this is just National Grid centric. I just want to point out that National Grid's not the only one doing this. And Eversource, Light Compact, Unitil, they're all working on their own demand response programs. Some of them are still under regulatory review, so we might be.
And us munis are doing it too.
Go munis!
Hey Paul, quick question. You have $35 a kW a year, but here in your flyer, you've got $20 a kW a year.
We're working on the map
elaborate?
all the way out to the end because it's
With
up
the cost
and
per
performance.
kWh? Okay.
Yep.
The performance payment as well as the capacity payment. Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
So, even if you're not in National Grid Electric territory, what you're going to hear from tonight from Joe will be so compelling for you because all of this is coming down the road in every utility and even muni territories. So, with that, I'd like to introduce Joe Gatto and Phil. Joe has actually been doing demand response for over 12 years. For 3 years, you had your own company, right? in a regional demand response focused company. And for 12 years, he's been a vice president of CPower. So I can't think of a more knowledgeable speaker. So thanks for coming, guys.
Appreciate it. Some say the earth was still cooling down when I was born. Thank you, Paul, for setting me up there. So we're going to do a couple of things tonight. We'll try to keep this fast-paced and not boring. Phil Chula is on my team, and he's going to do the back half of this presentation, which will focus on sort of the fundamentals of demand response as it's practiced here in New England. And I want to start out with some information on the power grid, and kind of set some of the stage. I think many folks in this room have lived pieces of this and are well tuned into it. If anybody's from ISO New England here, I literally used some of the charts that they have on their website to illustrate some of the points. But interestingly, from our perspective as demand responders, as people who enable demand response, the New England market has been somewhat stagnant up until the present time, and the interest now has ratcheted up precipitously, and it's because of the constraint now that has come to our power industry in terms of old plants closing, new plants being built, and new plants being built with natural gas as the primary fuel. And the result is there's more constraints on the reliability side potentially, and the price of capacity has gone up. Thank you very much. This is just a quick thing on us. We're headquartered in Baltimore. We've been an iteration of many companies. Combinations of names that you've heard before, but it's all come together under CPower, and you can see some of our statistics there. So we operate nationally, but most of the activity does emanate from the Northwest. So here's New England, some of the statistics. Interestingly, if you look at the top, a lot of power being used, but it's really been relatively stagnant. If you look at the summer peak was actually set back in 2006, and the winter even before that. And of course, we had our recession in 2008, so there was a period, you could say the economy was really driving power usage down, but some of those things have changed. And you can see how New England thinks about it going forward from a forecast perspective. 0.2%, not a lot of increase either in the KWH side or the peak, but they've gone back and done some math here, and if the effects of the energy efficiency work, which a lot of you folks spend a lifetime working on, and PV, solar, you can see what the numbers would have been. So it's a dramatic effort that's gone on, certainly in the last decade, to manage the growth of usage here. You can stop me at any time if you have a question. So the grid operator, this is what the grid operator does. He's essentially watching out for the reliability of the grid, is running the wholesale market, and is responsible for planning and making sure that the reliability stays on track. So each year there's another 10-year update, and there's any number of market rules that you go on their website. So don't go on the website and download the manual, but it's this thick in paper. But that's it. And so what we think about from our business is we have the grid operator and we have the utilities. Utilities being munis and the IOUs all have a piece in creating these kinds of programs that sit underneath or alongside what the grid operators do. So here's some of the things that we've called good news. So the natural gas fired generation and the renewables are taking the place of these older plants, older coal plants, older oil plants, older nuclear plants that have become difficult to run in terms of cost. And the benefit is then the third bullet. You'll see over the last 15 years what's happened to the emissions from the generation industry. It's gone down quite significantly. The wholesale prices, the power prices are down, but they are dependent on the gas price. So one has to watch for that. There's help with the distributed energy on a local level that can help constraints that utilities may have in the distribution side. And then there's all these subsets of technology improvements that have all gone towards affecting these numbers and those usage numbers they show up front. So here's the challenges facing the grid, facing New England. It really comes down to being able to get natural gas into the region, and it's become increasingly difficult. So pipeline infrastructure has been problematic, and I'll show a few charts later as to what really happens in the winter. It's quite a different fuel mix in terms of how the generation community is operating and how things like demand response come into play to help that. The retirements of these non-gas plants puts more constraint on the grid operator in the sense that, well, if we're not going to build a new coal plant, we're not going to build a new oil plant, what do we have left? And the resource choices they have become more limited. The intermittent resources, the wind and the solar in particular, offers challenges to the grid in terms of the reliability side, keeping the lights on, keeping the voltage to where it should be, and then there's also transmission issues, particularly to integrate more wind and hydro resources. So here's a pictorial of the plants that have left the system, they've programmed out, and the brown dots are older plants. And older is 40 years plus, some of these are bumping on 60 years, that are in what I said New England called the risk period. It's quite a lot of megawatts. The total usage is, including reserve margin, is roughly 33,000 for the 6-state region, and there's 10,000 there listed as closed. Here's the other side. Here's the resources that have come online and or are coming online, and these charts are you can read that. This is through 2015, and then what's proposed for the next 10 years, and wind, solar, and then the impact of energy efficiency has the same, essentially the same impact as the other two, and what happens. And the demand side, which is what we're talking about today, and energy efficiency and in distributed generation, those resources that are part of the ISO New England structure that actually contribute each day to the balance has gone from 100 megawatts, almost nothing in 2003, and now up to 2,500 megawatts. And then there's an estimate they've made on how much EE is going to be, how many dollars are going to be spent as we get into the 2020 time frame. Thanks. So here's the fuel mix over the last 25-year look at fuel mix, 2000 in the blue, and then last year in the 2024 projection And, it's kind of obvious what happens here. The decline of the nuclear oil and coal and the increase in gas, increase in renewables. It's quite a one-dimensional picture in terms of the merchant side of generation. The new resources from that previous chart that are proposed break down by type over on the left-hand side. Again, natural gas leading the way, and then wind is actually quite dramatic from a proposal perspective, contributing 35% of these new resources, and the rest smaller in size. And then on the right-hand side is just where these things have been, these investments have been proposed, in which states that have been listed.
Is that a question?
Yep.
Is that total energy or peak power?
Total or peak power?
Peak
Yeah,
power.
this would be nameplate capacity, so yeah, I guess in the case of the intermittents, it would be peak. I
Listing
believe.
Your units are listed in megawatts, not megawatt hours.
Right, so it's
Thanks.
So today, natural gas is 44% of the generating capacity, and we talked about the pipeline constraints, and what that does. And this is an illustration of a winter, summer. I'll say a off-season day as to what the fuel mix is, and from the generation side, and it's 70% gas and very little coal and oil. But what happens in the winter? These are actuals, so this was a winter day in 2015. But the gas constraints, the coal and the oil contributions could go up to almost 35% of the fuel mix. And the next chart gives it to you in kind of a winter season view. And so the light blue is the natural gas, and then the dark is the coal, and then the gray is the oil. And as you can see, as the weather gets colder, there's more issues on the gas side, trying to keep up, and consequently the generation fleet from the coal and oil perspective are called to participate. New England has a program they call winter reliability that they put in place with the polar vortex back in 13-14, and it's designed to address what may happen on one of these really cold days where gas is not available for some of these plants. And so they're paying folks, particularly folks who have dual fuel capability, be it merchant or private, to inventory oil and be able to burn oil for generating. So that's a program we actually participate in that with some customers, but it kind of sits outside of this infrastructure, but it was a necessary component to offset what might happen in a really cold day. So just some interesting things on the market itself. It's a $7.2 billion market. 1.3 billion of it is in the capacity ancillary services, which demand response is part of, and there's a couple of instances in the winters over the past 5 years where there was quite significant price volatility in terms of when those gas shortage issues hit, the price goes crazy as well. So well, this comes back to that gas constriction, gas constraint. And so for kind of moving to the demand response side, the ISO New England procures on a forward basis the capacity to provide the reliability that they need. Part of that is demand response, the bulk of it is generation. And as of June 1st, this power year that started in 2016, the price of capacity more than doubled, and this upcoming June 1st it's going up again, next June 1st it's going up again. So two things happen. It shows up in everybody's power bill as a cost, but it also increases the back side of those of you who are responsible for balancing your energy strategy. There's now that same amount of dollars is there to be offset by doing things like DOR. Phil will talk a little bit about how that works. Thank you. Here's the, just one more time, looking at this is a cumulative look at the new generation capacity over about a 20-year period. And while there is growth here in the renewables and some alternatives, very dramatically in natural gas driven region. So here's those capacity values, and those of you, we talked to Kate earlier about, geez, that put demand response went away. Well, one of the reasons it did is the values and capacities are in kilowatt year was quite stagnant from the start of the market. The market was created in 2010, and participation in a program where you're curtailing your load, not frequently, but you are curtailing your load, so there's an interruption potential. Every business owner's got a value proposition he's got to think about in terms of whether this makes sense or not. So at these values, the interest level is different than it is now. So you can see what happens here in 17, 18. I mentioned it started last year. In this zone, this is the Boston lead zone. Prices have already doubled. And these are actually the forward 3 years. So from here to here, double plus. Prognostications are that while there may be some moderation out here at the next auction next week, the moderation is more of a, I'll say, a slowly declining trail from reports that we've read.
Joe?
We'll see.
So this is the FCM pricing. The question I have is, as it relates to this document that was presented from National Grid, is the National Grid program in addition to the ISO New England FCM market?
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And so Phil will talk a little bit about how these programs interact, but this isn't the only, this is the fundamental, I think, for DR in most regions is their value capacity. But New England has, and utilities have, today, different ways to go at this. So there's 5 or 6 flavors that can bring value to a business owner and offset and or help your total energy spend, offset increases, help the energy spend. This is sort of the bedrock of the program, and it's quite different than it was. And then just a piece on, if there's any power sellers in the room, I apologize. I don't do that, but here's a breakdown of what your supplier has to contend with in terms of selling your power. And the capacity component is significant to that. The energy itself, obviously the biggest piece, but all of our bills have a look that's not unlike this. And so if you're able to reduce, obviously KWH down here, it's going to help of that energy component. If you can reduce the KW here and/or participate in some of these programs and use them as an offset, you're affecting, you have the ability to affect your total spend. So I think that's as far as I'll go. So any other questions, comments?
I got a quick question.
Sure.
So you can, in a sense, double dip. You can do this ISO, this national grid program, get the money out of there, and also do the other demand response programs in New England. They'll let you collect from both buckets.
I'll show you exactly how it works.
One question in regard to what Rich was just saying, clearly in this document, it's stating that the program hours will not, are targeted between 20 and 40 event hours per year, and that the maximum event hours will be 4 hours. I had some personal experience working with Burlington Electric Department a number of years ago. They have a unique situation where they peak out before the rest of the grid system. They would often dispatch first, and then ISO New England would dispatch so that the events would be running concurrently. Can you elaborate on how that would affect a customer's participation? How might that work?
Yeah, so Paul's group has had discussion with ISO New England, but I'll give a summary, because the summary is, this has been thought about, right?
Sure.
So if you want the programs to work in tandem, we have to look at the rules on both sides, and the key part of these rules is the baseline, right? What is your load at the time this event is occurring, and to be able to gain from your participation, you need to reduce from your point. So a coincident situation works pretty well. What doesn't work so well is one event's called 3 hours earlier than the other.
Right.
So National Grid and some of our input, we're in discussion as to just how to get around that. Both parties want both sides to work, so it's a matter of tweaking that baseline. So the answer is coincident events will not be a problem for participation in either program.
Okay.
That's the end result. Sir?
As far as the demand reduction, if in the normal incentive program, if a device is installed that reduces demand all the time, is the incentive paid on that in this new program, or is this just for peak shaving?
It's peak shaving.
So even though you're saving it all year long, it doesn't count towards the peak?
So there's another flavor that of these programs that ISO New England offers that does recognize that. And you're talking about permanent load reduction, and of course that's what energy efficiency is. So folks like National Grid and Eversource run those programs, and they give rebates to the participants for making those upgrades. Any capacity value that may be derived from that accrues to the utility, because they're the ones providing the rebate. If you made a permanent reduction of some sort that did not involve that support, financial support of the utility, there's a program Phil will show you, it's called On Peak, which recognizes that, as you pointed out, you're taking capacity off, you're doing the same, you're providing the benefit, and it can be monetized in that same, using those same capacity values as a foundation. There's I'll say the biggest subset of that are distributed generation assets.
So is this
Behind the meter distributed generation.
If I can ask one more question. Right now, the emphasis on the incentive is for KWH. Will that emphasis be also shifted in the incentive program to KW as well? It's in there now, but not significantly. Will that be changed? And when will this come into effect?
I'm not sure I follow. In demand response, we tend to think about it in KW. what Paul showed, those two components of reduction is an event will be called. You'll reduce your load from A to B. That KW amount is payable. But you will also reduce KWH along that 4-hour window. That's payable too. The ISO programs work the same way. The ISO program works off whatever the price of power, whatever the LMP was during that time. Does that get answer your question?
No, let me just ask another way. Right now, there's a PCR that they're figuring out for the incentive, that the utility uses to calculate the incentive. That is heavily weighted towards KWH versus KW. Will this in any way change that?
No, no, it's not changing. So that's a typical energy efficiency program, which focuses on KWH. Because the grid is what it is, we're focusing now, not more, but in addition to that, on KW, on demand response. Our traditional EE programs are not changing. The VCR is not changing. We're going to continue to do energy efficiency, KWH, but we are also now, in addition to that, doing KW.
The utility programs look at KWH. Also, if you do the custom application, you will realize they want to know what are the coincident peak demand reductions are.
There's no incentives
From
for
1
that.
o'clock to 5 o'clock in June, July, and August, and in winter, in December, January, between 5 and 7 o'clock. So that is also in the PCR model, takes account for those KW reduction and also the KWH reduction, and assigns different benefits for the society benefits. So it is calculated, and those KW reductions during the super peak hours, we call it, during the 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, those are calculated and put that into the power capacity market. And whatever the money comes from that is also goes into funding the energy efficiency programs.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the bottom line there, all that is the utility is offering an incentive to take as much advantage of that as you possibly can. If you see something else here, or Phil will show it, it looks like it's something that may apply to you. We're happy to talk about that as well. These programs don't compete. Think of them as layering together. There's some exclusivity, if you will, across some of these. But at the end of the day, there's any number of ways to reduce your KWH and affect your KW and come out better.
You were sort of referring to layering. Isn't the third layer to this that you're helping a customer to the degree that these periods are coincident with the peak period for setting capacity tags?
Absolutely.
We'll
talk about that as well.
Yeah.
You can, to the point that Matt was making earlier, you may be in a situation where on one of those really hot days and the utility is peaking, the grid is peaking, and you may be at the seasonal peak all at the same time, and that same action that you may take for curtailment is payable in 3 different ways. Or savings in 3
value.
Okay. One more question? Oh, I'm sorry.
So customers be responsible for any sort of costs to set up the program, any metering or administration costs?
There's metering required for the ISO programs. There's metering, interval metering required for the National Grid program. They're all the G3 customer base. Metering is inexpensive. It's a few $1,000s that allows for real-time pricing. We have to provide data. So there's a shadow metering system that gets put in place. Our model is that we take that out of additional earnings. There's no
to existing G3 customers with grid.
And G3 customers don't have to do anything. They don't have for the grid program, they don't have the data.
So what would the cost be if it was not a G3 customer, if it was a G2 customer?
We have to measure it, would be $3,000 around, they're all a little bit different, but there's a value prompt that you need to go through with each customer in terms of what data curtailment makes sense, would be the cost to implement, even though it's not. Obviously, there's lower amount of data less income, whereas there's always
If there are any more questions, let's cover them at the end. I don't want to cut Phil too short.
well, we covered some of your ground.
Yeah, you covered a little bit of it. Yeah, so I think a lot of your questions are how everything kind of implements together and fit together in ISO New England. So I'm going to give an overview of just demand response as a whole and then how it works in ISO New England. So demand response, high level stuff. It's the response to curtailing energy usage when demand and electricity outpaces supply. When there's a problem on the grid, you can curtail load in short notice or a day ahead notice and alleviate that stress in the grid. When you're a facilities officer, facilities manager, DR could be a collaboration of financial opportunities to lower down your energy spend. When you think about what options there are when the demand of electricity outpaces supply, you really have three basic options. You can either do nothing and let rolling brownouts and blackouts happen. You can increase supply, build more power plants, which is always a great idea, but you know that's all pretty expensive. Or you can decrease demand. And that's basically the programmatic response that we have with demand response. It's a programmatic response to these emergency situations. So now there's, as Joe alluded to, there's a couple of flavors of demand response. We have permanent and responsive. Energy efficiency, distributed generation, that's solar and cogeneration, load shifting. Those type of permanent reductions to the grid can be monetized through some of these programs. There are some requirements, as Joe alluded to, about who took the incentive rebates and all that kind of stuff, but those type of permanent reductions can play in some demand response programs. And there's also responsive demand. There's capacity, ancillary, economic, and there's also utility programs. So there's different flavors. Next one, next slide. And these flavors can all be stacked together. Not everything can stack perfectly, but it's our job to figure out what pieces work properly in regards to your active curtailment programs, in regards to your permanent reductions to the grid, and each state, each ISO across the nation all has different program rules, and it's key to make sure that you understand who and what these programs are and who to work with and how everything fits together. Now we're talking about stacking and all this stuff. Let's kind of get back to basics in demand response. You have an emergency on the grid, you want to curtail load. What can I curtail? What can if you're a facility? What are the ways you can figure out how to curtail? The most of our participants, lighting reductions is always a good one, but with all these LEDs, it's starting to get less and less as a factor. HVAC strategy is great. A generation. Now, generation is always key. There's emergency generators, a great way to perform, but there are new EPA regulation rules in regards to generators to play in demand response. So you have to better understand what the emissions levels are of those generators, because all generators aren't created equal. So some generators could play if they're below the emissions thresholds, some cannot. So that's an important one. And the last one is process and production. I know that you sit with in front of a customer or prospect, and you want to understand, can they shift their production? Can they curtail their production for an hour or two or 3 or 4? However that would work. And if they have the flexibility to do it, that's always a very clear and concise way that they can monetize in these programs. And we also like we love building management systems.
if they already have a curtailment plan in place where they can just flip a switch, those are always really, really good ways that they can participate in the program.
A question about the generation. So
Yes.
if you have a combined heat and power plant, what's the cutoff? There's some sort of cutoff on
Well,
size or?
It's more of for emergency generation. There's a emissions threshold, and essentially, if their emissions are below non-emergency levels, so it could be an emergency generator, but when you look at the EPA and you look at that threshold for the emissions, they could technically be below that, which they could play in the ISO program. If they're above it, it's not the end of the world. There's always options where you can retrofit, and so that's open. You can play that way. Now, with demand response, it's not like an Amazon buy with one click and you sign up and you're good to go. There is an implementation process. It starts with pre-qualification, and you want to look at interval data for a customer's load, where basically we want to look at interval data and we want to see what the load profile looks like, because all these programs aren't the same, and there are certain strike zones throughout the hours, throughout the summer, throughout the winter, where these programs are called. And when you look at a load profile, you can really see if, well, do they have load during those certain strike zones? So that's the kind of stuff that we work on pre-qualification. And if it all kind of works out, we're working to a site audit and a curtailment plan analysis. So we're in this with our participants, with our customers together. We want them to do as well as they can. So we want to work with them to create an itemized curtailment plan. So if the main facility guy is out on vacation, there's a plan in place where the backups can go and implement the curtailment plan to curtail safely and bring the loads back up safely. As we alluded to, there's a meter installation. For the ISO programs, there's 5-minute metering required. For the Connected Solutions N-Grid program, if you're a G3 customer, you're all set. And then there's confirming bid values, there's enrolling, and there's actually curtailment for the program in number 6, and then settlement, you pay them at the end of the season. And you don't stop there at the end, because once you actually curtail once, you can start to get better. You better understand what they can do, if it's better or for worse. What are the proper or better ways that they can help monetize in these programs. Next slide. So now let's talk about the kind of the flagship programs here in ISO New England. So here we have a little bit of an eye chart here, but if you look all the way to the left, those are your programs, and you look all the way to the right, those are your administrators. So the first 3 are ISO New England programs. The main flagship program for ISO New England is the real-time demand response program. 30-minute notice, summer and winter season, minimum requirements, a 1-hour test in the summer, 1-hour test in the winter, and then you're on call for any real-life emergencies. There's also the on-peak program. That's the permanent reductions to the grid. So if you have a cogeneration unit, solar, you can play in that market. You can monetize, and essentially they're not calling you to dispatch. It's just ISO New England recognizes and pays on those permanent reductions through those programs. There's also the Transitional Price Response Demand Program, TPRD for short. They love their acronyms, and that's basically curtailing when LMP prices are high or low. You can bid in and say, well, if the LMP price is X, I want to bid in and sell my power back. So it's more of not really an emergency on the grid. It's more about prices and how to monetize there. And then you have the new Connected Solutions program. It's a summer only compared to ISO New England's all year round. June, July, August, September, from 11 to 5. That's your strike zone for the Connected Solutions program. And we do have that 20-hour minimum, 20 to 40 hours. And there's no typical event length yet. That's to be determined. But all indications are we're going to have about 5 to 10 of those curtailments called through that 4-month season. And then lastly, peak demand management. So, as you know, every year, on the highest day on the grid, your cap tag is set. And essentially, it's that whatever that hour is on the grid, where you have the hottest load, pretty much is a snapshot taken of the facility's load. And essentially, that cap tag will pretty much drive capacity prices on your power bill. So if you have a power bill where your capacity is passed through, managing down that cap tag can save a significant amount of money on the power bill. So these are kind of all the different programs that there are, and I kind of want to show a couple other slides how they all could potentially work together. Next slide. So now if we go back to demand response, just some I already kind of told you it's a 1 hour minimum test summer and the winter, and then you're on call for any real life emergencies. And these are the real life emergencies on the New England grid here. There wasn't an emergency in 2014 or 15. We did have an emergency in 2016, August 11th. If you recall, that was a Thursday. It was a really hot and nasty Thursday. And we had the Mystic Power plant trip offline. And we had a reserve issue. And you combine that with a really, really hot Thursday, it caused an issue on the grid. And I suddenly called that from around, from about 3:30 to 3 to 6:30. And that pretty much got us over the hump when we had that situation with the nuclear power plant. Now you're probably wondering how performance is calculated. Joe alluded to a baseline. This is the baseline performance methodology works for both ISO programs as well as the Connected Solutions program. But basically how it works is your usage is the red line, and the blue is your baseline. Essentially, they build a baseline based on the last 10 business days, and it's a 10-day rolling average. And essentially that baseline is built for each hour. It essentially plots out where we expect you to be. So essentially your performance is, during that hour, where was your baseline, where did you drop to? There's a couple of nuances with baseline adjustments and stuff to acknowledge if you're running higher or lower that day, but I don't think we need to get into that today. Next slide. So now we have an example. So we have all these different programs. There's all these different options. How can all these play together at once, and what can the dollars actually look like? So what we have is ABC Company here. It's a manufacturing facility. It's in North Shore, up in the Enbridge area. They have a 500 kW DC solar array there. Their utility bill is a megawatt of peak demand. So megawatt peak demand, maybe they're running around 800, 700 kW normally. And then their power bill is a fixed price power bill with capacity pass through. So whatever that cap tag is, it's something where that could affect their power bill year over year.
Can you elaborate on that? When you say fixed price, are you saying fixed price per kWh for the commodity?
Yeah,
Which has the capacity tag baked into it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a power seller, but it's. Yes. Okay. There you go. Thank you. Thanks for why here.
So can I just ask?
Yes.
Does that mean on your bill, if it's passed through, you're going to see 2 kWh charges separately?
If you're going to power market it, it's going to be in the price. Fix it. That 26%
The power marketer says it's passed through?
Yeah, you have to make a determination on your power purchase agreement, whether it's passed through or fixed. If they fix it in your power purchase agreement, if you're going to pay 8 cents, you pay 8 cents all year round, and 2 cents of that, for example, is because of your capacity tag.
Right.
That way, if you curtail during the hottest hour of the year, it means nothing for you. If your power purchase agreement says pass-through, that allows you to reduce your load during the hottest hour and reap the savings. So it's very important your power purchase agreement.
Does the pass-through show 2 values on your bill? Will you see?
Yeah,
You'll see it on the cap tag, yeah.
See two tag on it,
As a kWh charge?
The challenge I think that Rich just highlighted though is if you don't have pass-through, like if you want a fixed all-in cost from your energy supplier and then you take advantage of being a first mover and to participate in demand response, although you'll reduce your demand during the ICAP tag event, you will not see the benefit of that. Your supplier will see the benefit of that.
In theory, it'll help you for the next year.
Correct.
For your cap tag.
Assuming your contract is up.
There's a lot of fine.
But even if you're fixed all in, I mean, I've talked to some of my friends that sell power, and I mean, when let's just say you're up for renewal 3 years later, they're still looking at that cap tag over that time. So even though it doesn't immediately affect you next year, by curtailing your cap tag, you don't get that immediate savings. 3 years from now, they're still looking at your track record of cap tags, and that's gonna help set your power. Now, I don't know exactly how much that affects it, but that is a determining factor.
What's really important though, from a big picture standpoint, is from a facilities, when you think of energy, you typically have your procurement people trying to get you guys the lowest cost per kWh. And then from the facility side, your goal is to consume the fewest number of kWhs, right? But a lot of times, those two entities within the company are not communicating. So you gotta make sure that you understand what your purchasing department is buying to determine whether or not your capacity tag is passed through or if it's all in, because that will impact what the value proposition of these programs are.
That is 100% correct. So we have a 1 megawatt peak customer, average load 700, 800 kW, and we walk in there and they cross their arms and say, we can't curtail our facility. When they walk in, the demand response, they have in their mind it's an all or nothing type program. It's not. What we talked about them is, well, you can't shut down your entire facility. You have day-to-day business needs. What other options are there? I mean, I asked about HVAC. Oh, we have a large HVAC on the roof. What about these non-essential pieces of equipment? Oh, I can actually curtail that. They have 3 production lines. Actually, if I can actually scale back the 1 of the 3 lines and still meet my requirements for product for the day. And we went from somebody that's saying we can't curtail everything, we can't shut down, we can't be sitting here in the dark, to saying we have a 400 kW strategy, and that's half their facility they can curtail. And we essentially created a 400 kW curtailment plan. And with that one 400 kW curtailment plan, they can play in the ISO New England RTDR program, the N-Grid Connected Solutions program, the on-peak program with their solar array, and the peak demand management program because their capacity is passed through. Now that's a lot. Now let's give a snapshot of a month to see what that would actually look like. So July is typically our hottest, busiest month. So you're not going to have this in every month, but this could be a busy month. Essentially here what we have is the cap tag is a predictive service. The cap tag is essentially trying to figure out when that peak's going to be. So essentially on July 6th, you had a cap tag call. You might have a peak from 3 to 6. You use your 400 kW strategy. You move on. So you're all set after 6. The next week, on July 14th, our TBR ISO New England had their 1-hour audit for the summer season. The call was from 1:30 to 2:30. The call was at 1. You had a 30-minute curtailment. You use your 400 kW strategy. N-Grid had a call the next week from 1 to 3. Use that same strategy. On the 26th, N-Grid had a call from 12 to 4, but also that was a cap tag day too. Cap tag might have been that day as well. So in that case, those two can double dip great, and that could be a great way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And then if you round out the month, let's just say that July 28th was hotter and higher than the previous cap tag days. And July 28th was the day. It peaked out at 4 p.m. and there are no more cap tag days the rest of the year. And you hit it on that day. I mean, you won't know that until later, but you hit it on the 3rd try, and now you've lowered down your capacity tag for the next year. Now, what that means dollar-wise. Now, RTDR, that's the ISO program, including there's a winter audit and any other curtailments, assuming that they perform during the winter, you're looking at a gross earnings of $33,000 the first year and $45,000 the next year. And that's just for that 400 kW strategy. And then you look at, you layer in the connected solutions. You can assume that there's going to be, since connected solutions is 5 to 10 curtailments, that's the expectation, assuming that there's performance of 400 kW in June, August, and September. Those other 4 months, there might be a scattering of other calls. Assuming that those performances all hit at that 400 kW strategy, there's another 14,000 for the next 2 years. And then, I didn't say the on-peak program once here because the on-peak program is not dispatchable. That is essentially, that solar is from 1 to 5 p.m. That solar is essentially, we're monitoring what that solar is doing from 1 to 5, which is the summer ISO peak times. Whatever load the solar is offsetting during 1 to 5 p.m., June, July, and August, that number is also calculated in. So that's another $14,000 year one and $19,000 year two. And then you hit the peak day. It says year two and year three instead of year one and year two because what you do this year is what you're getting paid on for this year or on the utility bill was already set from last year. So those savings that you do this summer will only take effect for next year's power year. So if you look at this one 400 kW strategy from somebody that said, well, I just can't curtail load, and well, actually maybe I can do HVAC, maybe I can do one of the lines, scale it back. If you're looking at a two-year earnings and kind of total energy savings benefit, you could have roughly 71,000. I'm questioning my own math. No, $140,000 in capacity earnings, and another $71,000 in power bill savings. So at the end of the day, if you do all those curtailments throughout the year, you're looking at a total energy savings standpoint of around $212,000.
Phil?
Yep.
Question, as far as the cap tag event is concerned,
Mhm.
is, if someone's participating with CPower as their curtailment service provider, are you guys giving the heads up that we're reaching a cap tag event and now is when you want to, because obviously normally emergency DR, that's being dispatched by the grid operator.
Yeah, that's 30-minute notice, you have an emergency be down.
Any grid program, that's being dispatched. This is something that's trending and it looks like the system's going to peak out. Is that what CPower does? Is they're going to provide guidance as, hey, it's looking like a cap tag day,
Exactly.
and now you guys want to curtail?
Yeah, we sent an email on Friday that says, here's the forecast of the week. There's a green, yellow, red. Red could be the potential bad day.
Yeah.
And then as we get through the week, we can say the day before, hey, 3 to 6 could be the cap tag day, based upon weather, local files, and all the secret sauce to figure that out. But this is a predictive service. I mean, anybody can say that they offer cap tag. It's, well, how many calls did it take to get them there? Did they actually hit the day? I mean, if somebody offers cap tag and say, I did it in 25 calls. Well, they offer it, but 25 calls is a lot. The key is how many calls did it take to actually hit the day? And the less is more valuable because you don't want to be using your 400 kW strategy every other day because only that 1 hour and 1 day is going to hit.
Phil, a little earlier we talked about what happens if the National Grid and ISO call an event at the same time on the same day, but in what you show there, the events from one would affect the baseline of the other, right? Or do you have it arranged so that the event is excluded from the baseline or another one?
That was N-Grid and cap tag, and I had them conveniently start at the same time, so there would be no issue. But I mean, what do we? I mean, if cap tag if N-Grid and RTDR are called at the same time, what's the?
I'm not talking about the same time.
They start at the baseline.
If you have a National Grid event one day and then you have ISO a couple days later, it's going to affect your baseline, right?
Oh, okay. I mean, so it's a 10-day rolling average, but I mean, if you're curtailing that 1 day, the baseline will lower down, but if you have multiple 10 days in a row of curtailing at 2 to 3 every day, then your baseline will start to get eroded. If you're curtailing for 1 day, that baseline isn't really going to get affected from that one curtailment unless you're doing it every single day, and that baseline is starting to actually recognize it after that 10 days.
On that 10 days, is it weighted, if I remember correctly, is it weighted where the previous day is the heaviest, and then it's incrementally less, or it's a 10-day blended average?
They got rid of that.
They got rid of that? Okay, thanks.
10% of
It's also weather adjusted though.
it, 90% of it.
Yeah, that's the easy way is the 10-day rolling average, but yeah, 90% the day before, and then 10% of that, and there's a whole.
It's mathematics.
Yeah, it's a very intense mathematics.
Excuse me, if you're in the ISO program and they dispatch or they call an event and you do not perform, is there a penalty?
For the ISO program, it is a mandatory program, and I mean, it's one of those things where there is risk to CPower if they don't perform, but in the sense of charging a monetary penalty, we've never done that. But the ISO program is a mandatory program. We want participants to know that you need to perform. The Connected Solutions program is more of a, I guess in the word is not, I guess you can consider it optional, but there are zero penalties for performing. It's just whatever you do over those 20 hours are averaged together. So if you miss a couple of Connected Solutions curtailments, you're gonna erode what your earnings could be. For the ISO program, if there's a one-time, if there's no emergencies during the summer, there's a one-time 1 hour try. If you miss that one-time 1 hour call, you're essentially missing your entire 8-month summer earnings if there's no other emergencies for the ISO.
And when you say call, you're referring to your DR provider or enroller.
Yeah, I mean,
ISO New England isn't saying, hey, we're approaching our peak capacity tag. They're not making an announcement that.
Can you go? The DR program is ISO New England driven.
Yeah.
They say, hey, we have emergency on the grid.
Yeah.
They reach out to CPower, they call. N-Grid does the Connected Solution program. The peak demand management is just it's a homegrown product. There's not somebody that's actually calling as an official program. This is just a way to say that you can earn on this end, you can save on this end, and you can bring them together.
And that's where you guys earn your fee.
Yeah. I mean, what we administer all these programs. We want to make sure that they all can talk to each other and work together, because we don't just want everybody running around chickens with their head cut off trying to figure out all this stuff. We want everything to kind of be gelled together, so you can save and you can earn using one streamlined strategy. Yes.
On the customers that are like G2, or even G3 that do not have a power market or agreement, they get their power from Eversource or National Grid. There's no one out there. They'll never get the lower line. Peak management.
Well, it does. I mean, so you're talking peak. I mean,
if I'm this hotel and it's the hottest hour, and I pull the fire alarm, pull the main disconnect, I drop 500 kW because I want to make some cash. How does Eversource and Star pay me back to the ICAP tags? How do I see my bill?
they're not paying. So these are all revenue earning.
Just the last line.
Yeah, these are all revenue earning check in the mail.
Yeah.
This is a utility bill saving.
How do I save from Eversource in this hotel if I drop 500 kW?
You don't.
It's not. Your utility bill will be lower for the next year.
Okay, how do they determine that? How's my bill?
Rich, we won't. If you lower your ICAP tag, if you're buying supply from your utility as a supplier of last resort, you're not going to a broker, and you lower your ICAP tag, thank you for doing it, you get nothing.
That's right, I want everybody to know that rule.
Yep.
That's why I asked the question. It's extremely important.
Demand chart.
That massive number, if you don't have a pass
If it was
to
your
power
monthly
market,
demand.
you're doing everything for nothing. But you should let people know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where when we do our site audits and we look at the utility bill, we see if it makes sense, because these all are not going to work for every single customer. I mean, some Connected Solutions, Connected Solutions is a great option for one, but not the other. Demand response is perfect for one, but not Connected Solutions. We don't want to run around giving everybody every single option, because each facility works differently. When we look at a utility bill, we'll know if peak demand management is even in play. I mean, so if it's not in play, we're not going to tell them to do it. I mean, that's just, we want to do the products that are going to make financial sense. And if they do that and it gives them zero benefit, we don't want to give that. We don't want to have that as an offering, because it's not going to help them. But my example behind was the customer that was perfect, that kind of fit every single thing, just to.
That's a great slide.
Oh, my name.
What's the 20-hour minimum? I don't.
We're going to call at least 20 hours a year. We're actually
20
aiming
hours
for
per
20
year,
hours per
not
year.
per event.
No. We can go maximum 4 hours per event.
4 hours per event. Right.
We're aiming for 20 hours per year. We might go a little bit over. If you read in the fine print, we could go as much as 40, but we're not going to do that.
Okay,
We're
but
aiming
that's only ICAP. It's not.
That was the National Grid program.
Right.
20 hours per year.
Yes, 4 hour max, 20 hours minimum
For a whole year.
calls during that 4-month season.
On your example with the calendar, when this gentleman had a question about what CPower is doing for you, in this month, you had 3 calls, that was based on your predictive algorithm.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that one of those was the ISO movement on demand.
I mean,
Right.
the cap date for the entire New England
Yeah.
grid. Let's just say because this was the hottest, this was the hottest, highest day of the year on Thursday, July 6th. And that was when the grid was at its highest. And it's okay, well, that could be the cap tag day. But then we're coming around, it gets even hotter. And now, late in July, well, shoot, now we're at this, the 26th is gonna be even higher than what we predicted on the 6th. So we need to call it that day. And then there could have been calls in July too, because July could have been where the first highest one was, and we think that could be the highest. So it really is it really is kind of a game to figure out, well, what is that end call going to be? Because maybe there's a couple of high loads there in June, but then they're thinking, well, I think we're going to get higher in July, so we're not going to call anything in June. But what if July turns into a really cold month, and somehow that June was the highest? So it is a balancing act. So that's why it's a predictive service. Yeah, and I mean you can
So
do it.
when you were comparing that other people could do this and it would be 25 calls and yours is 3, that's.
Well, I'm just saying, just an example.
That's the value that you would provide.
Yeah, I mean, like last 2 years ago, we hit it in 2 calls. Last year, I think it was about 7. I mean, it really is how the grid is operating, and there's really not a
An app?
Shed some more light on how the baseline is calculated.
Shed some more light on it. I mean, Joe, do you want to go? Do you want to explain that one?
Maybe we'll cover, that's kind of detailed, let's cover that afterwards. You can say it
I'll
now.
find you. I'll have Joe give it to you.
Well, he said, you take the last day the day yesterday, that would be 10% of baseline. And 90% of the baseline that day will be the history. So there's a marginal movement each day from the same hour on weekdays, from the same hour, 2 to 3 hour, for example, 2 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon. That's what you're going to watch. And it will move each increment. So it really doesn't bounce around a lot on a day-to-day basis. Take an extended shutdown, things will change. But there is a baseline adjustment that is built into all this. If you, your example, if somebody does go down for a week and he comes back, where his baseline is low, but his production is back to normal, the baseline adjustment recognizes he's back to normal. So you just think of it as, what am I normally doing? In our business, the way these programs have evolved, 10 years ago, you only thought about your peak. You could look about on your power bill, you could say, the last 12 months was 1.28 megawatts, and that's my starting point. Not the case. It's really about, what do I do normally? And that's how we start out thinking about these.
So a summer shutdown won't affect the baseline? Or?
There's a, you can
Correct.
shut down for a dispensation.
Like blue lines going
You're correct. It's like weather correct. You correct for weather, be correct for a
Well,
shutdown.
You can, they have some rules that recognize these kinds of things. You can call for an outage, and your baseline is preserved, even though you're not running, because you took a mechanical outage.
And then if we talk about a baseline adjustment, and let's just say your baseline is always here, and this is your baseline, let's just say you're cranking really high that day and your actual usage is up here. How the calculation works is that the 2 hours before is taken into account, your baseline is shifted up to where you're actually running that day. So you can get that extra benefit. It also works on the flip side. Here's your baseline that day. You decided we're not going to go in the office that day. We don't want to make anything. And you're running here. Your baseline gets shifted down. So your difference is your baseline shifted down to here. So your performance is eroded. So the baseline adjustment can work great if you're running higher, or bad if you're running low. So That's the kind of the day of, that's the day of adjustment of actually what's going on that day. Yes, sir.
So solutions like batteries or an ice plant that you're probably deploying every afternoon in the summertime, that would be your baseline for this program, correct? So batteries, ice plants, any of that stuff isn't supported under the Connected Solutions program because your 10-day baseline probably has that. You're deploying those daily to reduce your building's annual peak when it peaks out, right?
So your normal baseline already includes that.
Your normal day already has that dip probably
It
already
already
there.
has that. So the Connected Solutions program wouldn't support an ice plant or
Unless
a battery
you have
storage.
more.
Yeah, unless
ability to go
there's
lower.
additional load.
Right. Unless you install that battery only to deploy it for that one day.
It's gonna help you cap tag.
It's gonna help you cap tag, but yeah, you're not gonna be able to take advantage of the KW exception.
What you described, it's not dispatchable. You're building it in as a base.
Could that be on peak, Joe?
It could be on peak.
So back to the on-peak, the permanent reductions from the grid, you're right back to where the cogens and solar are bringing it permanently down. We can put the battery right in there. Here's your permanent reductions to the grid is 300 kW of battery, and ISO New England could acknowledge that.
So does the ISO program calculates the baseline differently? That 10-day average is just for the National Grid program?
No, it's for ISO, it's for the DR program and Connected Solutions.
Okay.
They both have the same baseline. I think we're probably over
Yeah.
there.
If there's any more questions, please stay after, but I know some people have to make it home, see their loved ones. So thank you guys, I think it was a great presentation.